I've been talking to Maritza about introducing a more youth-focused panel since Afromundo started, and the fact that we got so many amazing youth activists to come for the first youth panel is so amazing, and I'm so happy to have you all here. Storytelling's power is evident in art and activism. Can you share a personal experience where narrative and storytelling significantly impacted your advocacy efforts or changed your perspective? And we'll start over here with Elijah and we'll work our way down.
My name is Elijah Cage.
Yeah.
So for me, I was 15 years old, the year of 2020, May 25th, when the tragedy of George Floyd had occurred. I was raised by a single mother who is from Mexico, has no experience what it is like to be Black here in America. The tragedy of George Floyd was the first time in my life where I realized how my skin color can pose a threat to the outside world. During this time, Generation Justice produced 2 radio productions where young Black youth shared their experiences being Black here in America and how it has impacted them in a way. Through this production and through their storytellings, I was inspired to push myself and also inspire others the way I was inspired. And this is a way that my advocacy efforts were changed.
So I'm from down south. I'm from Otero County. Our hospital did a merger without the city really knowing what was happening. They ended up doing a merger with a Catholic-based provider. And with that went most of our reproductive justice rights, even though it was protected here in the States, here in New Mexico, sorry. But this merger was still allowed here in Alamogordo. In Alamogordo, you can't get birth control anymore at that hospital. They're not allowing vasectomies. They're doing anything and everything to control people, even though we've been marked as free and able to make the decisions for ourselves. So my narrative came into play with that. I got to be on her podcast and I got to share my story with the healthcare system. And I got to share my experience in the new healthcare system now that it's transitioning, because most of the world doesn't know anything about it. I mean, when I first got approached for this, I was like, wait, what? That happened? Like, I was even out of the loop, and I like to think I'm well connected. So I got to go out and share what I had learned with my community, and so many other people were just flabbergasted as well. And that's where our narratives are so important, because we really are a silenced community. We really do get overlooked. Our opinions are never heard. But the more people we can get to actually start speaking up, to tell the truth about what is happening, the better we are and the better chance we have at making actionable change.
My story comes from a year ago. I had a life-changing experience, and it happened with someone really close to me, and sharing my story with someone like my father, and getting him to change his perspective on things. And to tell you the background, we aren't close. He wasn't in my life. So we have maybe once a month calls, twice a year visits, I guess. So the one time that we are visiting, he knows my field of work that I'm in and my views. So he starts his rants about abortion and the very stereotypical male comments of the girl knew what she was doing when she was having sex. She should have to, deal with the consequences. And I let him do his little rants, and I was like, I wonder if your perspective would change if you knew that your own daughter had an abortion just a couple months ago. And it looked like someone just slapped him in the face. And he's like, well, who was the father? It doesn't matter. I knew I had made a mistake, but I in that moment, I had to decide for myself what was best for me and for the future. I would never want, I was dealing with someone who I realized when I went to therapy mimicked my father. I was dealing with daddy issues at the time. So if I decided to continue with this pregnancy, my child would feel the way that I felt without a father, with an alcoholic father, and just having once a month calls because he already had children that he was not taking care of. So I was just like, I hope you can sympathize with people and change your perspective when you think about what these women are deciding, because I didn't want to have a father like you or my own child. So
my life altering story, I guess, would have been last year in September. I got invited, me and Bold Futures got invited to an event that CYFD was holding. I was able to give my public comment surrounding the child welfare system and foster homes and CYFD. Afterwards, I was approached by a white registered nurse. And she was also a foster mother. And she came up to me in the middle of a conversation and tried to prove what I said wrong. And I let her talk, I let her rant, give her explanation. And then afterwards, I told her my life story. And I was a youth who had gone through the system, both with treatment facilities and foster care. I explained to her that being a youth in foster care was horrible. And it was the continuum of genocide and putting people of color back in the system and colonizing them to be whitewashed. I told her how the abuse that I suffered in her home and suffered in and out of treatment facilities. And she didn't know how to respond but by crying and trying to weaponize her tears against me. But the only thing that she could come across her mind was, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. And I feel like me sharing what I had gone through and telling her my experiences as a child who had went through the system really changed her point of view and helped her reevaluate what she was doing with her life.
Kimora, thank you for sharing a little bit of your work. But our next question is a little bit building off that. So advocating for New Mexico's Indian Family Protections Act represents a critical intersection of legal action and cultural representation. How do you use narratives to negotiate the complexities of advocating with legal framework while ensuring protection of your cultural heritage? Sorry, I know that was
No, you're good. So the work I do is for it. It originally was ICWA, the Indian Child Welfare Act, which was established in 1978. And it is about keeping our children with their families and their culture and their heritage. IFPA is an addition to that, and not only for Native American children, but for all people of color. So it kind of works hand in hand with the work that I do, because it's always been about the children for me. It's always been about protecting ourselves and our future generations to come. I have been able to work with other youth who have gone through the same thing. Families, parents, grandparents. It's just been such an honor to be able to do that too, because like I said, it works hand in hand. So it's not really so much hard. Maybe the negativity around it, the stereotypes, that can be hard to work through. But as I said, I had previously gone through the system, previously gone through that abuse, that neglect, that negativity, that judgment. So that isn't something new to me. So I go into these spaces and I'm like, already know that I'm going to be judged. And I'm like, you know what? You're going to hear me. You're going to listen to what I have to say, and we're going to make change.
Yes. Yeah, you're next on my hit list, so we'll just scoot it over. Kiara, given your background in voting rights activism, how do you view the significance of political engagement for BIPOC communities, and how might these activities help shape policies that affect our lives specifically?
Yeah, thank you for the question. When we talk about the significance of BIPOC communities in voting, I think we can look at history and see like it has always been significant. From us not having the right to vote, and they fought so hard against us to have the right to vote. From when we got the right to vote, and they brought up literacy tests and intimidation at the polls, it was still significant. And we can fast forward to today, where in Georgia, you can't give people standing in line water bottles when they're waiting in line to vote, or in Texas, where they're targeting Houston to take away their elections administrator and a lot of things. So we are significant, and we have to remember that our vote really does matter. And to answer the second part of your question, I think not focusing on, the presidential election, a lot of people are upset, and that can turn down voter turnout. But if we look at really what impacts us daily, it is the local elections, it is a smaller election, state level. And we really have to remember that when going out to vote. And I can think if we focus on that, we can definitely see more policy changes that will affect us daily.
Yeah. Vanessa, in your work in Bold Futures, focusing on young parents, how do you incorporate advocacy and narrative into your work? And what impact have you observed on families that you've worked with?
So, I just gotta say, just a little brief statement. So while I do work in partnership with families, I don't do consistently meeting with certain families or that kind of stuff. But like I had mentioned earlier, I did have the pleasure of sitting on a panel with Ascend, who is sponsored through Aspen Institute. They believe in a 2-gen welfare approach. So you have to help parents be able to provide for the kids. It's not always just about the kids, which yes, we want to always push the next generation so that they can perform better than we did. But we also have to remember, if our parents, if our leaders are not also being taken care of, how can they then instill life into the next generation? So I did have the pleasure of speaking to that, and it was definitely intense. We talked about everything from healthcare to how you provide for your kids, if you're needing assistance with food, with housing, with clothing even. We explored all these small avenues, and a lot of the other parents got to give their testimonies as well. I got to meet one of my friends. We talk on and off. She's up here in the northern region, actually. So we have a little distance. We don't get to see each other like we were, but she has a kid with a disability, and she shared her struggles of how hard it was to get accessibility for her kid, how she had to drive an hour just to see a suitable doctor. The good thing about the whole Aspen Institute Ascend program, we got local and national businesses actually coming to see what our culture, what our environment, what we're living in. Some people with families, some people without families, but that's again where the whole narrative thing comes in. I mean, a lot of people, unless you're going through it as well, you can be ignorant to it. And it's not intentional malice or anything, but you just don't have the information because it doesn't affect you. So that giving my testimony about where I've been and where I plan to go and where I would hope the future would go, really did give some people eye openers. Some people came and talked to me later. Oh, well, you had mentioned this. Can you talk a little more about it? Oh, well, you said this, and I've never seen it from that perspective. So, yeah.
But Elijah, with Generation Justice, you have a unique platform where young voices lead the conversation on social issues. How do you think that your youth-driven approach impacts the perspective and effectiveness of the advocacy work you're doing?
Thank you for your question.
No, thank you for your answer in advance.
um, I believe within our communities, it inspires and it influences youth to rise and join us in activism and make a change. There's a certain narrative, and in this narrative, youth don't know and they don't care about issues that go on within their communities and the world. I believe the approach and the work that I do with Generation Justice gives perception that not only do we know, but we do care and that we do want to make a difference. You know, youth are placed in schools where these issues are taught and they're sort of expected to know what's going on. So this idea that we don't know is interesting to me, especially when we see, you know, us today trying to make a difference, you know. It's stuff like this that impacts our youth and changes perception.
Yeah. I'm really glad that you brought up perception, and I think that it's really important to discuss like what people perceive as being youth activism versus what youth activism really is. Because I think that there's this notion of amongst like older demographics, and this is like everyone. It happens to everyone as soon as like we age up. You start thinking, oh, what's going on with these kids? Why are they not as active as I feel I was at that age? But I think that, like you said, that's just a perspective that we need to shatter because we are out here. We are doing just as much as like past generations have done, if not more. It's just that there's this bias that less age equals less experience, which means we should take you less seriously. So I'm glad that you addressed that in your response. And I think it's important. All right, I think that I want to make sure we get some crowd questions, so I'm going to turn it to the audience now. So, yes.
I want to know, like you said, they aren't really, because they're young, people kind of think don't take you seriously. But my question is, what is your challenge convincing people your own age to be passionate about this?
Yeah. And do we have anyone who wants to jump in? I could talk all day, but like, yeah, you want to jump in?
Okay, so I'm unfortunately a little older than the other kids up here. I can tell you, I absolutely love doing this. Like, I'm nervous, sweating bullets up here, but like being up here, I know that I can make a difference, even if it's just the 30 of us. Like, okay, it might be a little more than 30, it's fine.
Yeah.
But like, and then when you go and try and tell people about it, I can tell you, like, I've talked to some of my fellow coworkers that might be involved with the family system somehow, have kids of their own, take care of younger siblings, stuff like that, and try and like breathe some life into their situation. Normally, I get like, oh, okay. I think the word activist kind of has not the best notion in some people's minds. Like, almost like we're like car salesmen and you just want to drive around the lot. You don't want to actually buy anything right now. But I think part of the reason why some of the younger generation is so hesitant to want to take that next step is because they're kind of worried about that commitment level. I believe that, like, when we do our little community events where we invite people, we try and show them, like, hey, well, this is what we're doing. Like, you don't have to come up here. You don't have to be the one that sits on the stage, but just having you in the audience is enough to show that this is a valid movement, that we are having friction. We are going to be a part of the change. I don't know if we could come up with a cool, fancy word to make people feel safe and normalized in the area, but even just getting that one foot in the door sometimes is enough to get us the momentum to lead the charge. And I think the more we as the younger generation pull others in, the more the actual masses will follow.
Mhm.
But yeah, sorry, I hope that was a good answer.
I think to add to that is just giving hope. I think a lot of people have lost hope. A lot of young people don't see the vision of this is impossible. We continue to lose. Everything seems so bad right now. But if we can make it into terms of it is possible. Texas is bluer than we think. We just need to turn out the vote and put it into just educate people around us constantly and giving hope. I think that makes a difference for a lot of us just to remember that we are all in this together and yeah, if they can do the work, we can all win.
Yeah.
High School Musical.
I see some, yes.
I'm curious for all of you, like, what is it that grounds you? What is it that, like, when the world is so hard or when you're going through these hard moments or these things in your life, what is it that gives you that sense of hope? What is it that gives you that sense of like connection or like belonging or that you're important? Because you are.
I could go.
Yeah.
Can you pass this to me?
Scoot it on over.
Hi. For me, it would be my culture and my family. That's the biggest thing. Like, I work with child welfare, as I said, and again, all about the children. Like, it gives me hope. Like, what I do, I know I'm gonna get shut down. I know it's gonna be hard. I know it's not easy, but hope. Like, I want to make the system better. I want it to be safe. I want to be a whole community. And then with my family, like, that's all we're about. Growing up Native American, all I know is family. We're always there for each other. You know, grandma, grandpa, uncle, auntie, cousin, anybody, godparents. Like, we're always there. And we're always whole. And we hold our traditions and culture so close to us that it helps give us faith that we will persevere.
Yeah.
I don't want to hold back.
No, you're not
I will
talking.
be really quick. But I think one of the big things for me is I love history. I'm reading the autobiography of Malcolm X right now. And just realizing like they probably thought that it wasn't possible. The things that they were doing, nobody thought they would do. And just continuing that like it is possible. If we do it, it'll happen. Again, that's my question.
To answer your question, you know, I'm mixed. I'm Black and Mexican, and
Hey,
yeah. But you know, those two races have been through some traumatic stuff historically, and you know, haven't had the easiest time here in America, and just the thought of what my ancestors have been through, yet I'm still here to speak on their work and continue their work, you know, that's what keeps me going. That and God, you know, God plays a crucial role in that.
And so looking towards the future, what are the most pressing challenges that you all think BIPOC activists will face? And what strategies do you think we can use to most effectively address them? And we can start wherever. It doesn't have to keep going down the line.
I believe elections is something BIPOC advocates will struggle with, that they do and will continue to struggle with. In terms of election, there's a lot of disinformation as well as misinformation that is produced. And, you know, this kind of interacts and alters the truth that BIPOC advocates try to express and try to spread. And I believe a way to steps towards this to resolve this would be just spreading awareness of misinformation, disinformation. You know, we live in an era where social media plays a crucial role in the lies that are produced in our society. So I think ways to overcome these lies are just us being united and spreading awareness of misinformation and disinformation.
So I totally agree with the whole election thing. Referencing back to the video we watched, white supremacy is still a very real, very dangerous thing. I remember I was at work just a couple weeks ago even, and one of my coworkers walked past me and she just kind of like gave me this weird look and walked away. One of my other coworkers came up and she was like, I don't think she likes you. And I was like, yeah, I know. Like everyone can kind of see what that look meant. And she goes, I really do think it's because your skin. And I'm like, that is like novel. Wow. Like, thank you. But
Wow.
like people, like whether they say it or not, it's very real. Like we go into spaces and we're just expecting that we have to be the bigger person. And with these elections, and I don't know which side of the room we're on tonight, but
No, just speak it, and we'll jump in to
Like-
defend you.
like I will argue all day. Trump supports the white supremacy notion, and anyone that is flying that flag, they are supporting that. Like I can tell you, my parents are both Republicans. It's scary. My dad is Black and he's a Republican. That's crazy. But the fact that a lot of the older generations are louder than us right now is an issue. They're showing up. They're consistently at the polls. They're making sure that their voice counts. And a lot of the newer generation, like I used to be one of them. The first election that I could have voted for, I was like, what difference is it going to make? And then I regretted it later on. So finding a way for us to empower our youth, to make them feel like they are being heard, like you're not getting train rolled by the system. Train rolled? I don't know. Some word like that. Like if we can figure out how to collect ourselves and to make this wall, we can be a stepping stone for the next generations. And then we can make change here in the country, in our state, in our towns even. But we have to start making people feel like they have the power again.
In this perspective, it's just showing up for each other and being true allies. They are going to come and target everything from LGBT to voting rights to women's rights, and not just supporting one thing because we directly relate to it, but being there for people, our friends, family members, and people in our community that are different than us, and we just have to show up and be true allies every day.
We're going to face discrimination. We're going to face these constant problems that our ancestors have been. And it's just being able to persevere through them, to go through them and still stand strong and put our beliefs first and just get it done.
You were speaking about when you were leaving work and how one of your coworkers gave you just a look and you immediately knew what that look meant. And I think that that's something that's really important to speak about, because I think a lot of the times, like white people, when we talk about racism, they want to see like the Confederate flag. That's like what they see as racism. They don't acknowledge that it's something as simple as a look, and it can also like cut as deep as a dagger. So I'm glad that you did bring up that experience and how something that is that seemingly innocuous can like really mean something more sinister and deeper. So I think that was an important thing to talk about.
When you say you are mixed, Black Mexican, Mexican size, Black Mexican, Indian Mexican, what do you say when you say just Mexican? Mestizo.
Mexican. My mother is from Juarez, Mexico. So I identify as Mexican. I was raised with my mother my whole life. I don't know my father. So to me, if anything, I would probably identify more as Mexican than Black, if I was to be honest.
Yeah, because there is a lot of Black Mexicans that they're fighting for visibility. So when we hear Black and Mexican, I'm like, where is the Black Mexican? So I don't know, it's kind of,
Right.
but thank you.
Yes.
I wanna get that
Can
clarification.
I add a little something to that? I know I'm jumping in, it's kind of, this is how I'm gonna distinguish it. In America, if you say America, you're American, it is not assumed that you're a certain color because it is understood that we are everything, that we can be Asian, we can be indigenous, we can be Japanese, we can be all sorts of things. The trick of Latin America has been that nationality is equated with race. And so, yeah, to be Mexican is assumed that you look like, you know, a lot of people in the and that there are no Black Mexicans. And the thing is, not only did slavery exist throughout the continent in every single country of Latin America, it existed for centuries. But the myth is, although we are 144 million strong throughout Latin America, 144 million strong, but we are not the face of Mexico. We are not the face of República Dominicana or Colombia or Costa Rica or Panama or any of the, I don't care how white the country says it is in Latin America, it was built on slavery and the disappearance of indigenous peoples.
Yeah.
Are you all registered voters? And can you reach out to the high school and make sure the seniors are registered voters as well?
Yeah, I mean, in my government class in senior year, he actually, I love this teacher. I almost called him a professor. God, I'm college brained. But his name was Mr. Day, and he actually got in trouble from the school for teaching us how to register to vote. The class was mostly brown kids, and he was just telling us how important our voices were. And later that day, the principal came down into his room and was like, this is like technically like a legal gray area. I don't know. It was some bullshit that he said. But I think that it's important for us as like community, like as peers, to share that information with each other. Yeah. And also for white allies to continue, because he was a white man and he put his name pretty much on the line so we could vote. I think that it's important that they continue to do that, and he continued to do that even after the principal confronted him. But there are forces that are trying to keep us from having votes, and they're as close to us as our school principal. So, yes.
And I'd like to ask also that, Lauren, you participate in this answer round, but I would love to hear from each of you either a story of like the last time or the most poignant time that you remember that you have felt joy in your heart, but talk about joy.
Yeah.
When I got reunited with my mom, a few months later, I was invited to go to a Bold Futures event. And when I learned what the work that we were trying to do and trying to get IFBA in state and protect our children, I was full on, like, put me in, like, what do you need from me? You want me to tell my story? You want me to pour my heart out? Let me know. And I remember going to meetings all the time, going to events. I was invited to Washington, D.C. to go protest out there, and being out there with other Native Americans and other people and us practicing, and it was so beautiful. It was so healing because we were all together and we were all peacefully doing our thing. Like there was dances, we were dancing, we were praying for our kids to come home. Some people walked from different states to come. Just the energy and the power, and later on being able to hear that IFBA was passed and that what we were doing was heard. We were heard, and our children are going to be safe, and we did something that needed to be done.
But being able to see my mom, I live in a different state now, in a state where abortion isn't a thing anymore in Texas. And just kind of seeing her do her thing and trying to fight for women in her space to have women's rights and just coming and being fully accepted and having a person that I can tell everything to and her not judge me and her just inspiring me to even be on this panel today and share my story. I think it's just really joyous because I told her I was going to talk about what I did today, and in no way did I want her to be offended or feel away because I didn't want, my decision was based on my father, who she had a child with. So, and just being accepted and her just like, tell your story, and I would never be offended by it because it is your story. And it's just nice to be accepted.
Something that gave me joy. So I grew up a little bit rougher time. So something that like always makes me super happy, just like tears in my eyes and stuff. Like when I get to see my kid playing with other kids, like, yeah. So we grew up in rougher times, kids making fun of you, stuff like that. So when I get to see him being able to like live his life, my kid, by the way, we're in autism evaluation stage right now, so he is a little behind. So when I get to see him, sorry y'all.
We've got you.
Sorry, but when I get to see him like just be with other kids to experience not having to have the burden of why is this kid staring at me? Is this kid gonna say something? Is he gonna make fun of the way I speak? But to see him fully enjoying himself and smiling and laughing, that just makes all of it worth it. It makes me know that I am on the right path and securing his future so that he will never have to have the burdens that I had to grow up with.
Last time I was truly proud was when I graduated high school. Graduated last year from La Cueva High School. I was the first person in my family to graduate high school. My mother, I have 3 siblings, 3 older brothers. My closest sibling of age is by 10 years. So we grew up together, but not together, if that makes sense. My mother's from Mexico. She never had an education. She struggled raising me single-handedly. I don't know, just the world would have never expected a single woman from Mexico with a child who was Black to raise somebody who would graduate and be the first person in their family to go to college. That's what makes me proud. That's what keeps me going. The thought of making my mother happy, the thought of accomplishing these expectations that have been placed on me by my family and society, being strong for my mother, and just that is what makes me proud.
So I was hearing the song, You Bring Me Joy, in answer to Tas's question, what brings you joy? You're probably speaking on behalf of most people who are sitting here watching you. But what I really wanted to share with you is I have a grandfather that was 6 years old when he was released from slavery. And when I was a teenager, I had an opportunity to get to see him every day almost for a year. And I was in the civil rights movement in Arkansas. And he would listen. And one day he said to me, I wish I had done that. And now sitting here, listening to you and looking at you, I know exactly what he meant in terms of his way of being there and moving the movement forward was to survive from a 6-year-old that had to make his way. And looking at you and knowing that listening to you and knowing that you know what you're doing and that you're working together in solidarity to figure it out. That's like all of us. We don't have to live to see it, but we know it's true because of you. I just want to thank you that we could experience this moment because we are the ones that are trying to hold on to hope and faith at this moment. And you're the one.
Finding joy has been like something that's been especially difficult for me lately. So this actually probably is a good thing for me to think about. I think last night I did something that was pretty significant for me. I burned a lot of old memorabilia that wasn't serving me anymore. There were some pictures of people who, like in my past, hadn't treated me right. Some old family pictures that I had to get rid of. Some film that was of some people who were not beneficial to me. So I ended up having a bit of a farewell, not to that like part of my life, but to, I think, the emotions that I associated with it. I know a lot of people are very against like burning like family images. Like some people think that's like sacrilege, but it was really important, I think, for me. And yeah, just saying goodbye to that chapter and saying hello to a new chapter was impactful. So in light of the documentary that we watched, which highlights the importance of telling one's own story, how do you make sure your narratives in your community are authentically represented by the people who it impacts rather than telling stories through the lens of the victors or through a colonialist mindset like the state tends to do?
Through media justice, we provide our community with the opportunity to share their narratives in a way that is not modified, these corporate media productions don't tell the whole story. They just tell what is best to serve, the almighty dollar. That's all what the world is about. Mm-hmm. At Generation Justice, we emphasize that our guests, their time with us is their time to say what they want to say, to share what they want to share. And there's no modification towards it at all. It's just their narrative, and I believe.
I'll again reference back to the whole merger thing at our hospital over in Alamogordo. Sorry, y'all, I just went blank. Oh my gosh. So
No problem.
it's like crazy to fathom that this whole merger thing went down without any public opinion to it. Because I think for the majority of the Christians that I would say I associate with, the fact that there is no form of birth control available to them now, like even if they want to argue, well, abortions shouldn't be a thing anymore. But to ban the even beginning of it, like before any conception is even done, is crazy. So something that we try and push for down there is a community involvement. When you go into your city meetings, your city sit downs, they do them monthly. We can all, no matter race, ethnicity, no matter age, no matter sex, you can always go sit and you can listen to what your government officials are saying, what they're doing, what they're allowing. Sorry, I don't even know if that was answering the question.
No, that was answering the question. It was just, how do you make sure narratives in your community are authentically represented?
But kind of like earlier, as I was referencing, people won't ever be able to realize that there could be a flaw in their thinking if it's not pointed out to them, if it's not brought to their attention. I don't know who thought, oh, well, these people don't need a pill. These people don't need a Moderna. These people don't need vasectomies. We have so many people, which I'm sure you can hit on way better than I can. But we have so many kids, babies, children, teenagers in the foster care system that people have already passed along. I'm sorry to use such an awful word, but I mean, some by choice, some not by choice. And we keep getting headlines in the news about another baby in the dumpster, another baby dropped at a fire station. We have an issue. People are unwilling to take care of these kids, but we're forcing them to bring more lives into this world that need the love. It's not their fault that they were brought into this world. But again, trying to get people to go to these monthly meetings with their community, with the people that are in the positions to make these decisions, and share their stories there is something that we're trying to get.
I think a lot of us can relate to being the only person in the room. Whether that's a woman, you're the only woman in the room, you're the only Black person, Mexican, BIPOC. And just remembering who you're representing and who you're advocating for when you're doing your work. Sharing those stories, sharing those opinions of the people that you take into those rooms, being the only person, being confident and just strong, and not listening to just what everyone is agreeing with, not being afraid to be the only one there, because we are holding everyone on our backs and representing a lot of minority communities.
Working with the child welfare system and with ICWA and IFPA, we're really in close contact with our tribes. We are constantly letting them know what's going on, updating them. If there's a problem, we want to hear about it right away. We want to figure it out. Like I said before, the work I do works hand in hand with each other, with the legal and the cultural heritage, because it's what it's about. So sorry, I kind of went blank. Being able to, like I said, we work in close contact. So, and me being a Native American and going through the system and understanding the CYFD, and just, sorry, I keep going blank. It's been a lot of talking, kind of almost the same thing. But being able to share what our tribes are saying and relay it back, and going on the front lines and saying it and speaking about it. We have a lot of support from our tribes from here in New Mexico. And I'm from a few pueblos, so just being able to hear them and going into these spaces and remembering what they said and remembering what that ultimate goal is.
Yeah, I think that you being a part of that community is so powerful, and your community also coming around you to support you, because
Yes.
like you said, we hold a lot of weight on our shoulders. And I think that the community aspect of it can be so helpful, because you go back to your people and they can help you relieve some of that weight. So thank you for speaking about your community too.
But I'm just thinking about how much hope I have and how much you all have really inspired me, how beautiful your stories are and the work that you do. I'm wondering, as an older person and a parent, that we sometimes get in the way of our young people. And I'm wondering what advice you have for us, to your elders, to support you. What is it, how do we support you? And even if it means move out the way or let you speak, or I'm just curious, how do we ally with you and be your biggest supporters? What does that look like?
I haven't started one of these yet, so I'll just start it off and pass it down. I think that one thing that's especially important just with mending sort of this generational rift that we have going on right now, where it's, at least from my perspective, and that's the perspective I'm speaking on, you have your older people in the community who aren't really taking the younger advocates as seriously as they want to be taken. And then you have the younger advocates who are almost sort of having this resentment for the older people. Because it's when your parent like tells you not to do something and you just want to like do it way more. It's like, you can't do that. You're not taking this seriously enough. You're not showing up at rallies. You're not doing X, Y, and Z that I did at your age. And I think that's something that's more helpful, is being like, how can I support you? And like, how can I be the person, like the adult that I wanted in my life when I was advocating as a kid? Like, how do I make sure that you feel safe? How do I pass on the wisdom that I got from my experience advocating down to you, so you don't have to fall down the pitfalls I fell down? As like a young person, how do I respect my elders, but also push through tradition, because sometimes tradition is something that needs to be broken and there might be some disconnect there. So I think that's important for mending that rift.
I believe, from a parent's perspective, I'm not a parent, but I believe just acknowledging what your child is trying to do, what they're trying to do, and just truly understanding what they want. We already go out in a world where anything we say is used against us and we're not heard. The worst thing, something worse than that, something more bad than that is coming home and you get the same treatment from the outside world.
Yeah.
That's something that, and I think that this realization isn't really spread amongst parents. Parents have this image of their child that they hope they achieve, that they hope that they become, when in reality, your child isn't going to do everything you want. They're not going to say everything you say. The only thing you can do is just understand them, hear them, and support them in whatever ways.
Like, coming from a parenting perspective, I would say, whether it's coming from a fellow advocate or me in my personal life, trying to just expand what my expectations are, and just knowing that things aren't always going to go the way that I want them to go. Like, I've had to learn a lot of patience as a parent, and I feel like that'll also translate into the advocacy thing. Like, sometimes I'm on a high, like, yeah, I want to do this, I want to go out, I want to pass out flyers, I want to do all this stuff, and then sometimes I get in a lull and I'm like, yeah, maybe next week. But giving a little leniency, we're forging a new path and a new direction that we would like to see the world take. And it might not be the same direction that everyone else is seeing. So I would say never stop directing us, trying to lead us, but also understand that force is not always the right way. And sometimes we have to look at things from a different angle to be able to come to some sort of connection.
I think echoing Elijah a lot is just being supportive, and not diminishing or neglecting our experiences just because they aren't the same as yours, because we are in a different generation and we are experiencing a lot of different things in the world that you guys weren't. So yeah, just being supportive and allies to us, even though our experiences may be different.
One probably big thing would be listening to us and also sharing your lived expertise. You guys are our elders. We are supposed to learn from you. And just being open with us. And I know sometimes these memories are hard to talk about and are very touchy, but being able to be vulnerable with us and meet eye to eye and tell us how we can also do better, what you think we should say, what you think we should do. And just engaging with us and being involved within our community as youth and as adults too.
To all 5 of you on that stage who somehow recognized that this communal space was a brave and safe space where you could share your wisdom. And I say wisdom specifically because we have to understand that we older generations have a lot to understand from our youth, for sharing your courage, for sharing your insights, your joy, your vulnerability. Just thank you, because I know it takes a lot of courage to stand up and share with us as honestly as you did. And so it hasn't gone unnoticed. We see